This is the Construction Leading Edge podcast from constructionleadingedge.com and buildermasterclass.com. My name is Todd DeWalt. It's my job to help you, the construction business owner and leader, eliminate chaos, maximize profit. Got a great interview for you today, and we're going to be talking about how do you scale up a business using systems and processes. This interview is with Rich Whitten. He's the CEO of Reconstruction Experts, and they specialize in reconstruction. He'll explain what that means. They have offices in Colorado, Florida, Texas, and California, and they work all over the country. To give you an idea of the scale of their operation, they've rebuilt 2.3 million homes, and they've installed over 150 million shingles. Rich will explain more about his business, but here's what you're going to get out of this interview. You'll learn about Reconstruction Experts' business, some of the unique things about it, and some of the keys to its growth in recent years. We talk about what are some of the common mistakes businesses make when trying to scale up, how important are systems and processes to scaling up, and why. This one is interesting. Why do some people leave, or why should you expect to lose some of your people when you implement processes and systems? We talk about some of the key differences between the CFO role and the CEO role and what advice Rich would offer you, or if you're thinking about making that transition. We talk about what Rich believed to be true about being CEO that he was surprised to find out wasn't true after he got into that seat. We talk about Rich's favorite failure, and then he explains how to create a trust-based organization and how conflict helps create trust. This is a deep dive into the process of creating and implementing systems and processes in your business. Where do you start? How do you get your team to implement it? What mistakes should you avoid? We go deep into the things that you need if you want to scale your business or just eliminate chaos and keep it the same size as it is. Great interview. You're going to get a lot out of this. I've got a couple of resources I want to share with you before we get to the interview. If you're a busy construction business owner, there's a pretty good chance that you don't have good visibility into your financials. You could be getting financial reports too late, or maybe not getting financial reports at all. Or maybe you're not keeping your books up and you really don't have any idea what your numbers are. Well, if that's you, you're not alone. Scott Schweiger said this: "I highly recommend Apparatus Contractor Services. My small startup construction company was over a year behind with its bookkeeping. I was wearing way too many hats, and ultimately the books suffered. They provided bookkeeping solutions that got us caught up in the systems to stay on the right track. I'm so happy I'm turning over payroll processing to them as well." Elizabeth Evans said, "Hiring Apparatus was a game changer for our business. They've allowed me to grow our construction company over 100% since we hired them about a year ago." Bill, president of Spice Industries, said, "Hiring Apparatus was one of the best business decisions I've ever made. They have almost completely freed me up from sitting at my computer reconciling budgets with my own makeshift system." So if you want to offload your bookkeeping or payroll headaches, or you just want better reporting, the Apparatus Contractor Services team may be able to help you. Visit goapparatus.com to hear from other construction business owners and see how Apparatus can help you. That's goapparatus.com. If you own a construction business, tell me if you've heard yourself say or think any of these things. I feel like an island. The only people around who know what I'm dealing with are my competitors, and I can't talk to them. I'm working too many hours, and it feels like we need to make some big changes like hiring or systems or software, but I'm afraid it won't work out. I'm afraid it won't help, or I'm afraid I'll screw it up. I don't know what I don't know, and I would sure like to avoid an expensive learning curve. Maybe you've been figuring things out on your own for a long time. Maybe you're wondering, am I doing it right? Is there a better way to do things? Have you heard this one? I have good ideas about processes and systems that will help, but I just can't seem to get myself to do the strategic stuff that's going to move the needle for me. I need accountability. Or maybe this one, I'd like to be part of something bigger than myself, to be part of a group that's making a difference in our industry. What about this last one? I want to be constantly learning and improving. If someone else has already figured out a better way, I would like to know it. Any of those sound familiar or any of those resonate with you? Well, I'm about to roll out something to connect you with other like-minded construction business owners who are doing similar work and who aren't your competitors. It's going to help you get accountability, help you share ideas, help you support each other, and be part of something bigger than yourself. However, I need your help. Before I finalize everything and get everything built out, I need to make sure that it is as valuable as possible for you. And that's where you come in. If you can take a short 2-minute survey and help me build this thing, I would greatly appreciate it. You can take the 2-minute survey over at buildermasterclass.com/mastermind. That's buildermasterclass.com/mastermind. Thanks for your help. All right, here we go. Let's jump into my interview with Rich Whitten, CEO of Reconstruction Experts. Enjoy. Rich, welcome to the podcast. Thanks so much for being on here. What part of the country are you in?
Well, thanks for having me on, Todd. I am coming to you from Denver, just outside Denver, Colorado.
Oh, nice. So let's jump into it. Tell us the name of your company, the type of work you do, and just give us a brief overview of your business.
Sure. We are Reconstruction Experts. We do reconstruction of occupied properties. And so what do I mean by that? So we look at occupied properties in distress, and they're in distress for one of three general reasons. One is it was built wrong to begin with and is going through some sort of defect litigation. It was damaged in some way, whether that be Mother Nature or man-made or what have you, or it's just aging and in need of repair, upgrade, or remodel. So those are really the three markets that we play in, both. And it's any kind of occupied property, whether that be residential HOA, residential apartment, or commercial.
Got it. And give us an idea of the scale of your business, ballpark revenue, number of employees, things of that nature.
So we're surpassing 125 million annually. We're operating out of 4 states, which is Colorado, California, Texas, and Florida today. And we've got about 300 employees across the group.
And how long has the company been in existence?
We are in our 20th year.
Oh, congratulations. 20 years, $120 million. That's a pretty good clip. So we're going to talk about some of the keys to your growth, some mistakes that we want people to avoid. We'll talk about your progression through the C-suite offices to where you're at now and some of the differences. But let's start with this. What are some common mistakes that businesses make when they're trying to scale up? This could be mistakes you've made, mistakes you see other people make, but what would you say are some of maybe the top 1 or 2 mistakes that construction businesses make when attempting to scale up?
Yeah, and I'll hit the punchline quickly. We've absolutely made these mistakes and been learning from them along the way. But I think, number 1 is having very well articulated systems and processes. So you've got everybody speaking the same language and doing things the same way everywhere. Very, very crucial, especially when you're trying to expand multi-regional. I think a couple of other keys I'll hit on. One is, don't, as growth comes, don't lower your standards for acquiring talent. You've got to have the right people. They've got to buy into what you're trying to do. And if you're just pulling anybody in because you've got so much work, the cost of turning them over is going to be more than the cost of waiting to find the right people. And, maybe lastly is, you got to make sure you have an audit function. Or a set of reporting that you can understand what's going on in your business on a daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly basis. And if you don't have those things, it's too hard to be involved in all corners of your business. So you need some element of consistent reporting to let you know what's going on.
Got it. I want to talk about those reports in just a minute, but You mentioned, first of all, having well-defined systems and processes, and talk a little bit more about that. Where would you, where did your team start with, if you can go back that far, but where did your team start when it came to putting systems and processes in place?
So I'll take you back even before we realized that we really needed to do that. And where we were is, our service offering was resonating really well in the marketplace. And so the demand was there and the ability to sell was there, and we were taking advantage of it. And as we were executing a little differently depending on the who and the where. And so what happened is, the further, like, as we grew multi-state, and the further you got away from the mothership, as I call it, the more variation of outcome we were getting. And so, but we didn't know what was going on because people were doing it a little bit differently everywhere. And so we absolutely made some mistakes and had some bad projects, and we're upside down on a few. And so that was really the call to us to go, okay, we have to think of one way of doing this everywhere, and we have to implement that very consistently, and everybody has to jump on board. And not everybody did. And so we actually saw some turnover for people who kind of wanted to do things their way to now doing them a standard way. And that was okay. That was part of the evolution that got us to the point of scalability. And so that took a pretty good amount of time to drive that all the way through the organization. And so it's really a commercial project management approach to the reconstruction market is the way we think of it. And so it's very much a set of tools that we make sure everybody is following.
So it's interesting. You mentioned some people didn't respond when you did that. Why is that? Why do some people just not respond to that? Why are they driven away by that when you start to implement systems and processes?
So this actually goes back to, when you're talking about talent acquisition, is prior to us having well-defined system and process, we're bringing in people with experience in the industry, whether that came through commercial, new residential, or the remodel restoration world, and they have an idea of how things should go, right? I don't see the need to a QA matrix at the front end of my project, because I can watch the quality as we go and I don't need to document it. And so you sort of get people who, hey, I don't like doing it this way. I like doing it my own way. And it's not necessarily that they're wrong. But it's not getting the group where it needs to go. And so people who don't want to adopt will move along, and the people who do will embrace it. And then now you have a template for when you bring people in, you start querying them as to, hey, here's how we like to do things. Are you good with that? Do you see that? Do you agree with it? And now it's, that's brought our turnover curve way down since that time.
One thing I noticed when I started implementing systems in businesses that I worked in, it seemed like when there were no systems and processes, there was no accountability, and people could hide. And they liked that. Some people liked it. And what I noticed was, when systems and processes came into place, then the expectations were clear. There were fewer places to hide, and some people just selected out of that because they didn't like the accountability.
Absolutely true. And the old 80-20 rule, where 20% of the people were doing 80% of the work, that happens in a non-system and process environment. And not only are people hiding in it, you're breaking the back of your good people, because you're having them have to do more and more. And so now when you create, and that's a great point, you create the accountability that sits on top of that system and process, that reporting, incentive alignment, all those things that go along with it. You root those things out much more quickly, and you're able to pivot more quickly. And that's better for the overall organization. You're exactly right.
And so it's having this rigor, these systems and processes in place. And when we talk about systems and processes, we're not talking about micromanagement, right? We're not talking about telling people every little move to make. That is not a system or process. That's just not scalable. But we're talking about, this is how we do things. These are the expectations. So it tends to cause the the people who want to hide and don't like accountability to opt out. But what does that do to your top performers?
Yeah, I think it makes it better and easier for them. And so now I think the number one thing that comes out of it is across your entire organization, you've got everybody speaking the same language, for lack of a better term. And so from a support standpoint, you can support from any direction now. It's not just the person who's sitting next to you. It's if there's people in California who want help, there's people in Colorado who can help them. And so I think that's one great benefit from it. And I think the other one is those people, when you embrace it and you improve upon it, right, you're bringing everybody in the organization up. And so we have some employees who really drive the improvement every day of this, because it's got to still evolve, right? We want it standard, but we also want to make it more efficient at the same time. And so how we do that's really important.
When you roll out a new initiative or a new system, or maybe it's streamlining a process, what are the keys to getting the team to actually implement it? What have you found that works well to get the team to ultimately implement it?
Yeah, there's a couple of things that come to mind with that question. One is we've got really smart people who drive great ways of doing new things, but sometimes we lack the patience of rollout, right? And it's got to be slow, methodical, make sure you're bringing everybody along, because if you go right to the answer right away, you're going to be the only one out there, and you need to bring everybody with you. And so one thing is take your time, make sure you've got enough time in your timeline to implement all these things everywhere. And I think the second is everybody kind of adopts at a different pace, and so that's okay. But as long as you're making incremental steps towards your end goal, don't change your goal. Maybe just modulate how quickly you're achieving it.
Yeah. One thing that I've found, and I've gone to offices of some of my clients in various states, and they knew exactly what the problem was. It was really clear, and they knew exactly what the answer was. But the CEO's position was like, Todd, I can't get my team to do it, and they see the problem. It's really clear, but I just can't get my team to do it. And what I found is that humans don't like being told what to do at the most basic level, right? And I learned this probably, I wish I had learned this 20 years earlier in my career. My projects would have gone a lot smoother. But my mistake was I would go into my office, go into my job site trailer, develop a plan, come out, open my door. Okay, team, here's the plan. This is what we're going to do. Throw it on the desk. You're welcome. And that just didn't go that well, because what was missing, what I found was I didn't get the team to buy into it. And what I've learned and what I tell people now is the half-ass plan that your team comes up with that you think is half-ass, that they'll actually implement, is better than the perfect plan that they will actively find reasons that it won't work. So it's so much easier when you get your team involved in defining the problems, coming up with solutions, and then it's like it just rolls downhill in my experience.
You're right. And you can do that on the front end, and you have to spend way more time than you think on the why.
Yes.
Why is this a good idea? Well, how is this going to benefit, me, the employee? And you better be able to describe that, because it's obviously going to, right? If you've done it right, and you have to be able to describe that. And if you can't describe it, then you better go back to the drawing board and say, oh, I better come up with a different plan. But yeah, an inordinate amount of time spent on why in explaining, new system and process rollouts.
Yeah. I think that's overlooked. The why is overlooked. Involving the people closest to the problem is overlooked. In some cases, personally, I thought I understood the problem, but the system I developed didn't really solve the problem, or it didn't solve a problem. I didn't understand the problem. And yeah, but very, very important to spend lots of time on the front end. So you talked about having a mechanism for auditing and reporting. Well, one more question on processes. I would be curious how you would address this. If somebody said, Rich, we need you to come in, let's say you were brought in to an organization, maybe it's a company you're going to acquire or whatever the case may be, and they're telling you symptoms like, we have chaos everywhere, we have lots of sales, but we have inconsistent results. I don't feel like my people are taking ownership. Everything's running through the CEO. They feel like they have a flat organization. They're working lots of hours. There's just chaos everywhere. Our margins aren't where they're supposed to be. Our customer experience is not good. Our people aren't happy. Where would you start?
Yes, that's a good question, and I think at the intersection of the selling and the operational execution, right? So the first thing I heard in that was, maybe not enough capacity planning, right? You're out there selling ahead of your ability to execute. And so one is you want to think about growth in a managed fashion. And everybody thinks, okay, growth means more sales. Well, the part of it means more sales and execution. You can't forget that important function. And so this is where you come back to, and I think it leads into sort of the reporting mechanisms. I have to have a plan and a forecast that tells me what my demand is going to be so I can make sure that I have enough supply. And when those things get incongruent, what you just described ensues, right? There's chaos, and also I think the second thing you need is when you look at how do I create the supply piece is if everything is going through one decision maker, you can't scale. And so you will have to think about in advance of when you need that supply, how do we put the resources in place and the organizational structure in place where that can happen more on its own than with one person having to deal with all of it.
Great stuff. Great stuff. So let's talk about reporting. Where should someone start? They're thinking reporting. I have no reporting stack. I have no dashboard. I have bookkeeping. But and one analogy I've heard is they're basically flying their plane blind. The cockpit windows are all covered up. Maybe they have some functional dials, maybe not. They feel like they're moving. They hear wind outside the windows, but they don't have any good data. Where would you tell them to start? Where can they get the 80 for the 20 in getting some reporting put in place?
Yeah, the very first thing, in any company that's engaged in project level, in a project-based industry is you've got to make sure your books and you know whether you're making money on a project or not. And so where people get in trouble is I've got cash. That must mean I'm making money. Not necessarily. That could be a timing thing. And this is a trap that we see even trade partners fall into, right? So you want to make sure that, hey, am I making the margin I thought I was going to make? Am I making the profit I thought I was going to make project by project by project? And so if I am, then that's good. And I can see that. But you've got to have clarity on that before you start building out anything else.
Absolutely. Get your precision bookkeeping in place because financial reports will be based on that. Pricing and estimating will be based on that. Cash flow forecasting will be based on that. Yep. Good advice. Excellent. Let's talk about your tenure with the company. You've gone from you've been the CFO, the COO, and now the CEO. Let's talk about the differences between the CFO role and the CEO role, first of all. And let's talk about the CFO role. I think most people are more familiar with the CEO role, but what is the job of the chief financial officer, the CFO?
I think, the primary job of the chief financial officer is to partner with the business elements of the company to make sure they have the information they need to be able to manage and run their business, right? And so the very rudimentary part of that is a historical looking view, which is what we were kind of just talking about is, are my projects making money? Is my division making money? Are we, where are we spending it? All those kind of scorekeeper type of things. Accounting is keeping track of it. What the CFO's role is mechanizing it, right? How do we use it? And that's really what I see as the CFO's primary function is, how do I get the information usable and into the hands of the people who need it to make decisions with?
Got it. Let's talk about the COO, the Chief Operating Officer. What's their job?
So it's amazing how it sort of changes, right? There's common elements, but the biggest difference there is now you've got a large organization potentially, and that's really where we get back into the, how do I make sure everybody's buying in and doing it the same way everywhere? And the biggest portion for the COO is, if I'm going to scale my organization, that means I can't be everywhere. And now I'm going from an environment where I could manage, like, if I had 5 superintendents running 10 projects, I could understand all of that. When I have 20 superintendents running, 80 projects, that's a different thing. And I'm never going to be able to understand all that. So is there a way that I can have a report that tells me management by exception, right? Where do we need to focus? What is in trouble? What isn't in trouble? Because now I have to manage by the exception rather than managing everything. And so how do you implement a system that allows that? So the standardization of process and a way of being able to find out, where do I spend my management bandwidth, either mine or my team's management bandwidth, and making sure that we stay on the track.
On the operational side, what, if you don't mind me asking you, if you're okay sharing this, what software stack do you use? What are some of the tools you use to keep track of all that?
So we use we have an ERP system called Coins that we utilize, but we're also, which gives us CRM, some project management tools, as well as then all the accounting and backend functionality. But today we're actually working in a sort of a custom environment using mostly still Microsoft Office automation software for estimate templates, for margin analysis templates, and for some of the QA stuff that we're doing. So we're actually a little bit anachronistic in that, from that standpoint. We're looking to move to another platform, and we're investigating a few right now. But yeah, we certainly see a lot of room for improvement and efficiency. We did that, again, back to getting everybody on the same page. Now, how do we make it more efficient? And we're certainly pursuing that.
With an organization of that scale and so many moving parts, I'm sure at any one time there are a variety of things you could focus on. How do you and your team decide what to focus your business improvement efforts on? What's your thought process?
Yeah, I think you sort of get the feedback of the pain points from the people who are doing it on a daily basis, right? And if your systems are clunky, they're not talking with either your referral partners in the design world, or with your trade partners in the subcontract world, to the extent that that's creating a lot of time suck that could be spent doing more efficient things or improving upon some of the other areas that we want to focus on, that comes up pretty quickly. The low-hanging fruit, as we call it, kind of arises on its own pretty naturally. And so I think the key, though, is don't just solve one thing, solve the system. And so, we can solve it for a project or a project manager, but what we really want to do is identify, is this systemic across the entire group? And let's come up with a systemic solution for it.
Are there certain questions you ask to be able to delineate between symptoms and root causes, or these surface level things and the systemic problems?
I think they fall into, 2 main columns for me is one is, what is a problem today? And 2 is, what's an opportunity? And so, we look at it those ways. And so when you start asking about, hey, if everything were off the table here, how do you see this being, how do you see improving upon this? What's a better tool? What's a better way? Are some of the things we're doing really not giving you the value that you need? And do we need to adjust? We want to be a slave to our process, but we don't want it to run us. And so are there things in our process today that are no longer really valuable and we can get rid of? And so you have to continually ask these questions, and your people will hopefully put those forth, but you've got to create a forum to do that.
And what is that forum?
Yeah, I think it's an interface. So, when I was COO and I had an operations manager in every region reporting to me, and then they had a team of either senior PMs or, their project teams, I think you meet regularly with the idea of how do we need to continue to evolve this process, or what do we need to do to make it more efficient? The problem with that is you've got to really be diligent about that, because those meetings are easy to cancel in the face of everything else going on. And so you don't want to find yourself there. And so protect against that.
Good advice. Let's talk about your transition from the CFO role to the CEO role. What advice would you offer to someone who wants to make the transition from one of the C-suite offices up to that CEO role, or over to the CEO role, however you look at the arrangement of the org chart?
Yeah, I will talk about myself, and I think other CFOs may be a little further, more developed than maybe I was with respect to the importance of culture in your organization. I will talk. When I was CFO here at RE, and that's the job I had when I joined, I thought, oh yeah, culture, that's important. But you have a view of it where, okay, well, that's not paramount, right? And I can assure you, as CEO, culture is absolutely paramount. If you can get everybody in your organization bought in and pulling in the same direction, all your other problems start to get handled very, very quickly and very, very well. And I didn't realize the importance of that, quite honestly, when I was CFO. And so, as CFOs, where we come up and we come through the accounting and analysis world, and everything's sort of mathematical to us, we don't spend enough time thinking about culture development. And so now I spend the majority of my time, quite honestly, thinking about culture development with internal marketing, and what do we really want our people to buy into, and how do we want them to operate in the marketplace, and all those things are super important, because, as I said, when you get that right, everything else gets a lot easier.
What would you say are some symptoms of a lack of focus or emphasis on culture?
I think when you're only focused on, how are we doing today? You're only focused on, the performance of this project versus that project, and we're not focusing on what are we delivering to the client, right? And so, especially in our industry, we really are, we're dealing with people who are in a position of anxiety because something's happened to their facility or their home, in many cases. And that anxiousness, we've got to understand how best to communicate. And so what I really love is our employees are so great at this, and they deliver such high touch service, and we get such great feedback. That's really what we want. And everything will fall out of that, right? So don't get me wrong, we're a for-profit company. We want to make the money we're supposed to make, and we want to make sure we're hitting all our performance targets. But it all begins with making sure we're taking care of that client. And so when you think about the org chart, you think about turning it upside down, and everybody who used to be at the top is now at the bottom. How are we supporting all those people who are now touching our clients every day? And when you think about it that way, that's how you're starting to get your culture right. And if you're thinking about the other way, what are they doing for me? That's how you're getting your culture wrong.
Yeah, that is great advice there. Yeah, good stuff. And culture is tough, because some people would say, well, we don't have a culture. Yeah, you do. You do.
Either one you planned on or one you didn't plan on.
That's right. It's either intentional or unintentional, but you have a culture. Yeah, that's really interesting. That you said you came up through the finance and accounting background and being analytical. That's almost as bad as coming up through an engineering background, which I did. And I can tell you, we didn't talk about company culture in engineering school. That That was not on the graphing calculator, that's for sure. Let's talk about failure, right? How has a failure or apparent failure set you up for later success?
Yeah, I think the only way that happens is if you turn into that failure and you deconstruct it and you analyze and say, how did this happen? What do we need to have been doing differently? And those failures, and that is absolutely how we've evolved. We had failures. And from those, we said, okay, what do we need to do? What you don't want to do is turn away from your failure, as I think about it. Say, well, that was a failure. Let's just keep going and just, that hopefully won't happen again. Well, I assure you that's going to happen again. And so you've really got to turn into and understand it and say, what are the initiatives I need coming out of this so that we, can insulate ourselves from that happening again.
Yeah. And is there a specific situation that comes to mind that seemed to be like, wow, that didn't go well, or that was a failure, but it turned out to be a setup for later success?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I think I talked about, we had, varying ways of executing projects, and we had like 3 or 4 at the same time that purely flopped because we were reliant on the people, and we had no oversight or check-in or reporting mechanism to find out whether they were really on track or not. And so when that happened and we suffered through these, we made it right with the client, took our wound, took our licks in terms of performance. When that happened, that was really the catalyst for us to say, hey, we have to undo and break and rebuild our execution function. The market still loves what we're doing, what we're offering, but our execution is too variable to be scalable. And so that was the thing that, and I say this to my management team and anybody who will listen for that matter, that if we hadn't have been there, we wouldn't be here. There's just no way. We wouldn't have put together the robust, scalable systems that we have today that has allowed us to grow if we hadn't have gone through that. There's no way.
Yeah. You mentioned people and processes, and it was dependent on people. Tell me which is more important. If someone wants to grow their business, maybe it's just expand in their market or take on another market, what should they start with? Should they start with people or processes, maybe something else, and why?
Yeah, I think, this is a hard question because you can have really well-developed processes, and if you don't have talented people to execute them, then you're still nowhere, right? But talent alone without the system and process doesn't get you there either. And so it's, this is sort of a cop-out answer here, but it's a little bit of both, right? It's, scribe a system, bring in people who you think are talented to analyze and give their opinion of that system or improve or make it more efficient, and continue building it. And then as you create that blueprint, both of what you want somebody to do and what somebody who's good at it looks like, that you now know how to bring them into your organization or what you're looking for, then it starts to build much faster. But you've got to kind of start at the beginning there. So it's a bit of both, I would say, Todd.
Yeah. One thing I've seen a lot is there's this hope that I'm going to hire a project manager and they'll bring systems with them, or I'll hire a superintendent and they'll bring their systems and they'll build the system for me. Does that work?
If that's what you're hiring them to do, maybe, but generally you're hiring them to go run a project, and you can't necessarily do both in real time. And so I tend to think that if you want to bring in a consultant, if you want to have somebody help you build that process, those systems, that's probably a good way to go. And then from that, create your criteria for going to hire people. And then when you're bringing people in, you're training them. And that's a key element. You're training them on your way. But people bring different views, right? You want to take advantage of what their experience set is, but you also want to put them in a situation where they can be successful and not just leave them on an island and say, okay, go do, I hope it goes well.
Yeah. Here's a bunch of work.
Yeah.
And just let me know if you need any help. Maybe I'll answer. Yeah, what I found is that the people who are successful as project managers, superintendents, administrators, engineers, et cetera, whatever role they were successful in, it was due in large part to the system that they used. And the skill set to run a system successfully is very different than the skill set necessary to create a system, especially on the fly, while let's run projects and build systems at the same time. Very difficult. And I just haven't seen that work well. There may be some unicorns out there, but I think it definitely works better to have some outline of a system to begin with and then bring the right people in. Yep. Yeah. Good stuff. All right, here's one of my favorite questions. What is something that you believe to be true about business that some people might think is either unconventional, maybe even a little crazy?
Wow. I think the the primary thing that would come right back to is, and I'll talk about it as a view from the CEO. We are engaged in people as opposed to product, right? And so, when you think of our name, Reconstruction Experts, is the word construction right in it. And people think you're in construction. Well, no, technically I'm in a service industry. And I oversee people and will do some myself of the construction, but primarily you have to focus on the people you are serving. And you have to focus on the people in your organization who are serving them. And you're actually not even focused on, the necessarily focused. I mean, you get to it, right? And it's got to be good, but you're not initially focused on the construction piece. And I think that throws a lot of people. When I have that conversation with peers in the industry and we talk about this construction challenge and that construction challenge, I'm like, yeah, that all pales in comparison to the challenge of actually communicating with the occupants and the clients. And if we can get that part right, the rest of it, and we plan it right, the rest of it's kind of an execution outfall, hopefully. But I don't know that that's so crazy or such an outlier, but how much time we spend motivating and thinking about, how to appeal to people's personalities and their fears and make sure that everything's going to be okay. It's way more than nobody ever taught me that part in business school. That's for sure.
Yeah. I remember picking up one of the few times I ever picked up a copy of the Wall Street Journal one Saturday morning. It was shortly after Herb Kelleher, the founder and former CEO of Southwest Airlines, passed away. And it was the employees and retirees of Southwest took out a full-page ad in the Wall Street Journal honoring Herb Kelleher. And they told stories about how he loved wild turkey, he loved smoking cigarettes, and he loved to kiss people on the mouth. And he remembered everybody's birthday and how he made people feel. And he was really focused on people. And I think he made the statement that we're not an airline. We're a customer service organization, or we're a service business, and we just happen to fly airplanes. Mm-hmm. And I think that frame of mind is really paramount, especially today when there's such a war for talent going on. People they'll feel the culture. You may not have a documented organizational chart for those of you listening, but your people will feel it. They'll feel whether it's an upside down org chart where the managers support their people, or if it's a top down where the employees support the boss. They'll feel it. And I think that's incredibly important. So thanks for sharing that. I think that is a little unconventional for some people. Some people need to hear it because it's a reality. So you have an audience of a few thousand of the most intelligent, attractive, not easily pandered to construction business owners and leaders out here who don't take flattery. They don't succumb to that stuff, obviously. But if you had a couple of minutes to speak to them, what else would you what would you share with them? What is a message that they need to hear in your opinion?
I think the number one thing is kind of the theme of what we've been talking about. And I boil it down into, creating a trust-based organization, right? And so there's a book that I identify with really well. It's called The Speed of Trust by Stephen Covey Jr. And it talks about, if you're creating a trust-based environment, all the other transactional costs start to come way, way down, because now you're absolutely working together. And is it easy? No, but you have to be open, honest, and let everybody kind of know what's going on and give an honest assessment of who they are. And we are, as humans, we avoid conflict. And I think when you have an opportunity, you don't, hopefully it doesn't, appear as conflict as much as it appears as interaction, but through conflict is where you really do create trust. Is let's work through this. We disagree. Disagreement is important too. Don't just say, I know everything. Like, disagreement is the lifeblood of our organization. I think of a lot of good organizations. And so, but when you get that trust right, as I said, everybody is pulling in the same direction. I know trust and cultures can go hand in hand. But the culture is being client focused, and the trust is an organizational dynamic, as I think of it. And so I would really tell people, hey, be open, be honest, overshare with your employees. Don't undershare. Tell them where they stand. Tell them where you stand as a group. And make that, make it a constant and a global rallying cry for the entire group.
Great stuff. Great stuff. Well, I really appreciate it, Rich. This has been fantastic. If people want to connect with you, find out more about your company, whether that's website, social media, etc., where are some of the best places for them to go? And I'll make sure and include those in the show notes. I
appreciate that. And our crack marketing folks made sure I was armed with these.
Nice.
Off my head now. So for Instagram, Reconstruction_Experts. On Facebook, it's Reconstruction Experts Inc. On Twitter, it's Recon EXPHQ. And so that was a lot I get, but that's everywhere on social media. And then, of course, our website, reconexp.com.
Got it. And if you could send those to me, I'll be sure to get those in the show notes. Great stuff, Rich. I really appreciate it. I'm a big systems and processes guy. I enjoy the conversation. Thanks for sharing about your organization, your culture, and how you guys got there. And thanks so much for taking the time to be on here.
Thanks so much for having me. Really enjoyed it.
All right, there you go. Be sure to check the show notes for all of those links so you can connect with and follow and learn more about Rich Whitten's business, Reconstruction Experts. And if you're interested in helping me design a mastermind group for construction business owners, and you can take 3 minutes, if you have 3 minutes to spare, and you could take a 3-minute survey, I would certainly appreciate your help if you could go to buildermasterclass.com/mastermind. Take that 3-minute survey. That's buildermasterclass.com/mastermind. I would certainly appreciate it. As always, I appreciate the ratings and the reviews. If you could take a moment and do that, that helps get the word out there to other folks. And if there's somebody you know of that needs to hear this podcast, share it with them, share it on social media, send them a text and say, dude, you got to check out this podcast. As always, I appreciate you listening. Thanks so much for the feedback. Keep up the great work, and I'll see you next time. If you're a busy construction business owner, there's a pretty good chance that you don't have good visibility into your financials. You could be getting financial reports too late, or maybe not getting financial reports at all. Or maybe you're not keeping your books up and you really don't have any idea what your numbers are. Well, if that's you, you're not alone. Scott Schweiger said this: I highly recommend Apparatus Contractor Services. My small startup construction company was over a year behind with its bookkeeping. I was wearing way too many hats, and ultimately the books suffered. They provided bookkeeping solutions that got us caught up in the systems to stay on the right track. I'm so happy I'm turning over payroll processing to them as well. Elizabeth Evans said hiring Apparatus was a game changer for our business. They've allowed me to grow our construction company over 100% since we hired them about a year ago. Bill, president of Spice Industries, said hiring Apparatus was one of the best business decisions I've ever made. They have almost completely freed me up from sitting at my computer reconciling budgets with my own makeshift system. So if you want to offload your bookkeeping or payroll headaches, or you just want better reporting, the Apparatus Contractor Services team may be able to help you. Visit goapparatus.com to hear from other